tonight. Israeli forces report that another hostage was rescued in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, residents are evacuating Lebanon as the war escalates. Jason Perry reports. President Biden is visiting Florida and Georgia to assess the damage from Hurricane Helene. The death toll continues to rise as the search for survivors continues. The massive dock worker strike continues. Over 30 ports have shuttered, and there's still no sign of progress. Shoppers panic buying, worrying about shortages of consumer goods. Jack Bradley in D.C. Vice President Harris is making her fifth campaign stop in Wisconsin. This time, she's joined by former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney and former President Trump held a rally in Saginaw, Michigan this afternoon. NTD's Jason Blair and Iris Tao bring us the latest from those two battlegrounds. Special Counsel Jack Smith calls it evidence of private citizen misconduct, while former President Trump labels it election interference. What the latest filing in the 2020 election case tells us. Tonight, at least 200 people have been confirmed dead following the devastation of Hurricane Helene. The deadliest storm to hit the U.S. in nearly 20 years struck Florida a week ago. Recovery efforts are ongoing as officials continue to search for missing people. NTD's Christina Corona tells us the latest.
Hurricane Helene has now claimed 202 lives. More than half of the deaths have occurred in North Carolina. Up to an estimated 20 feet of rushing floodwaters decimated entire communities there. As of Thursday afternoon, the fatalities include at least 98 deaths in North Carolina, 19 in Florida, 33 in Georgia, 39 in South Carolina, 11 in Tennessee, and 2 in Virginia, according to an NBC News tally. Hundreds remain missing, and authorities are struggling to identify some of the victims. Buncombe County reports that many residents remain isolated due to a lack of services.
We're continuing to find people. We know we have pockets of people who are isolated due to landslides and bridges out. So they are disconnected but not missing. Power, Wi-Fi, and phone coverage remains a barrier to connections. Only once our search and rescue ends will we truly know a number of unaccounted for.
President Biden traveled to Florida and Georgia Thursday to survey storm damage caused by the hurricane. The federal government has provided over $20 million to Hurricane Helene survivors. More than 5,000 federal personnel have been deployed, including 1,500 from FEMA. So far, FEMA has delivered 9 million meals, 11 million liters of water, 150 generators, and 260,000 tarps to the affected region. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp announced the suspension of the state's gas tax on Thursday. He said this will save Georgians up to 32 cents a gallon on regular gasoline and 36 cents a gallon on diesel fuel.
A lot of people in rural communities that we talked to yesterday are spending a lot on fuel right now, responding to the storm, running generators to get their wells going, to power their homes, to power nursing home facilities and other things. And so we feel like this will economically help people a little bit.
South Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture, Hugh Weathers, said farmers who dealt with the drought earlier this year are now facing this disaster as harvest time approaches.
The parts of the state hit by Helene are mainly livestock, trees, forage, poultry. We've had some damage to cotton and pecans as well. Pecans in the Low Country. It also reports some produce losses for our fall produce crops.
Weathers said it will take time to evaluate the damage to farms, but he reported that at least 300,000 chickens died in the storm, and a pecan farmer in Edgefield County lost all their trees. Florida residents who lost their homes expressed how devastating and overwhelming the experience has been.
Catastrophic, devastating, heartbreaking, to this magnitude. None of that explains what happened here.
The first thing I could not see was my roof line. I knew just as soon as we got around the first curve, I couldn't see my roof. I said, it's not there. Just haven't had time to get over. I dare you, Debbie, and now it's just compounds all of that.
As of Thursday morning, near 1 million customers were still without power, according to poweroutage.us. with the majority of these outages are in the Carolinas. Helene Swift floodwaters destroyed numerous power poles and electrical lines, requiring significant infrastructure rebuilding before power can be restored. However, FEMA announced Tuesday that satellite capabilities have been deployed in each affected county, along with satellite radios and phones to assist local officials. Christina Corona, NTD News.
The government says funds for dealing with natural disasters are running low. This comes as victims are now getting $750 checks to buy critical supplies. Will Congress be pressured to head back to D.C. to sign off on more FEMA funding?
Yeah.
Melina Weisskopf reports.
FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas told reporters the agency is using the funds it has to deal with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene.
Flying all those illegal aliens in here.
$750 for folks who need immediate needs being met, such as food, baby formula, and the like. And you can apply now for anyone who's watching this who has been affected.
President Biden said he'll likely ask Congress to give FEMA more money, as another disaster could happen before the hurricane season ends on November 30th. Congress already signed off on $20 billion for FEMA last month. Now some lawmakers are questioning whether the money is going where it should.
Certainly we need to keep FEMA fully funded. I would also point out that according to an investigation out of the House, Mayorkas has spent $2.7 billion in terms of its housing and assistance to illegal immigrants. And I got to tell you, my own constituents in Florida, the people of Asheville, are really scratching their head that they're hearing from the DHS secretary they're out of money to help them, but they still have money to help people who have come to this country illegally.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has not said whether he would call lawmakers back to sign off on more funds, but he emphasized the need for oversight.
Congress has previously provided FEMA with the funds it needs to respond, so we will make sure that those resources are appropriately allocated.
But the pressure is building for congressional leaders to sign off on an emergency package. Senator Rick Scott, who usually cracks down on what some call wasteful government spending, today called on Senate Leader Chuck Schumer to immediately call a vote on a clean Hurricane Helene supplemental aid package. And earlier this week, a bipartisan group of California lawmakers told House Speaker Johnson that more funding is necessary. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The massive port strike is now on day 3, and there is still no sign of progress. How is the standstill adding to the devastation brought by Hurricane Helene? NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from the White House.
A day after touring the devastation Hurricane Helene has brought to the Carolinas, President Biden was seen walking past homes completely destroyed by the hurricane in both Florida and Georgia. The White House is promising to pay for debris removal and emergency protection for 6 months in North Carolina and 3 months in Georgia. The governor of Georgia, grateful for the emergency declaration in some counties, said more needs to be done.
Or thank the president for adding the additional counties to the disaster declaration. I did tell him that I felt certain he would hear on the road that there's still a lot of other counties out there that are expressing frustration that they haven't been added to that list yet.
The president made a point of putting politics aside, praising both Democrat and Republican officials in those states for their efforts.
No Democrats or Republicans out here. It's what we do to make sure we restore the economy. Only Americans are here. Our job is to help as many people as we can. And also, by the way, when you do that, I hope we begin to break down this rabid partisanship that exists. I mean that sincerely. There's no rationale for it.
It's unclear whether the massive port strike will delay recovery efforts, but it may lead to a cost increase on essential supplies.
Yep.
There's still no sign that the Biden administration will get involved in the strike. Biden said that he won't invoke the Taft-Hartley Act, forcing workers back to work and bring parties to the negotiating table. The strike has shut down 36 ports. Dock workers want an 80% pay increase over 6 years, and they also want a commitment to stop automated projects that could replace their jobs. But many consumers are worried that this could lead to a shortage of goods, as we're seeing panic buying of food, water, and toilet paper. If the White House intervenes, union leaders will be unhappy, and most of them are throwing their support behind Vice President Kamala Harris in the election. If the White House doesn't intervene, the economy could get worse and sway voters who could connect us all to the Biden-Harris administration. And with the election just over 30 days out now, there's certainly more pressure on the Biden administration to get something done here. Reporting from the White House, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
A federal judge in Georgia dismissed a Republican-led lawsuit on Wednesday seeking to block President Biden's latest attempt at student loan cancellation. U.S. District Court Judge J. Randall Hall decided not to extend the month-long pause in the cancellations, ruling that the Republican-led states didn't have the legal right to sue. He said Georgia didn't prove it was significantly harmed by the new plan. Hall sent the case to Missouri, where the states on Thursday submitted a filing asking the court to block Biden's plan. In the meantime, the Biden administration is free to move the plan forward, which could start as early as Friday, though it would likely take days or weeks to carry out. If successfully implemented, Biden's plan would cancel at least some student loan debt for an estimated 30 million borrowers. A proposal to ban non-U.S. citizens from voting will be on the ballot next month in several states. The measure could have a significant impact in swing states, North Carolina and Wisconsin. Idaho, Iowa, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, and South Carolina will also consider the amendment to their state constitutions. 17 municipalities, including San Francisco and Washington, D.C., currently allow legal non-citizens to vote in local but not federal elections. Critics of the proposal say federal law already prohibits non-citizens from casting ballots. Supporters say the measure addresses voter concerns about record levels of illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border. They also cite the recent discovering of potential non-citizens on voter rolls in some states. A D.C. federal judge releases special counsel Jack Smith's latest file in the 2020 election case against former President Trump. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on the 165-page document, which uses new evidence to paint Trump's alleged actions as those of a private citizen.
Today, an indictment was unsealed.
Wednesday's release comes after special counsel Jack Smith filed a reworked indictment in response to the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling. He later asked Judge Tanya Chutkan to permit an additional lengthy filing to further explain why Trump's alleged actions were not part of his official duties. Smith refiled the same charges, but states that the alleged scheme to overturn the election was a private one. The filing includes an allegation that a White House staffer heard Trump tell family members that it doesn't matter if you won or lost the election, you still have to fight like hell. It also alleges that on January 1st, 2021, Trump told his Vice President Mike Pence that people, quote, are going to hate your guts and think you're stupid. This if Pence didn't use his role presiding over the congressional certification of the election result to benefit Trump. Trump has pleaded not guilty to 4 criminal charges, accusing him of a conspiracy to obstruct the congressional certification of the election, defraud the U.S. out of accurate results, and interfere with Americans' voting rights. Prosecutors working with special counsel Jack Smith presented evidence to argue that the charges against Trump should stand. This despite the Supreme Court's ruling that former presidents have broad immunity for official actions taken while in office. Prosecutors aim to demonstrate that the remaining allegations fall outside the scope of this immunity.
Interference in our election.
Trump reacted to the release, calling it pure election interference, speaking on News Nation.
This was a weaponization of government, and that's why it was released 30 days before the election. And it's nothing new in there, by the way.
Trump spokesperson Stephen Chung blasted the disclosure, saying, "This entire case is a partisan, unconstitutional witch hunt that should be dismissed entirely, together with all of the remaining Democrat hoaxes." Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Vice President Kamala Harris is joined by former Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney in Wisconsin today for a campaign
Liz
event.
Cheney.
NTD correspondent Jason Blair is on the ground in Ripon, where the event is being held.